We are good to go. Allison will show up in a minute. Great. How many people here listen to podcasts? That's it. All right, for the rest of you, how many of you spend at least half an hour in the car every day? 30 minutes. Wow. Okay. Your minds are about to be blown. Podcast. You listen to radio? No. Oh. All right, for the rest of you who don't work in radio, podcasts are going to change your commutes forever. There's people listen to podcasts for many different reasons. There's over 700,000 podcasts on iTunes. And you can, anything you're passionate about, you'll find. You can tune in if you want true crime, if you want comedy, if you want religion, if you want wellness, or if you want inspiration and self-development. And that's where When Women Win comes in. So lots of different reasons why you might want to tune into podcasts. Here's how this session is going to go. I'm going to talk about why I created When Women Win, and then how, and then some lessons learned. So those are the three questions I'm going to answer: why, and how, and what have I learned through the process. Then I'll open up for Q&A and do a short wrap-up at the end. Cool? Cool. This is super casual, so jump in at any point. Really, I don't mind. Right. Why? Why did everybody says, what's your why? So three different things were happening in parallel, and they kind of came together and culminated in the creation of When Women Win. So the first thing was that I had spent 17 years in the corporate world. A lot of that, I worked in 3 different organizations, and wherever I worked, I saw that junior and middle management women were not seeing enough senior women. They weren't seeing enough women at the top. They didn't have enough female role models. And this was a problem. This was a problem for 2 reasons. First of all, you can't be what you can't see. So when these women were looking up and not seeing people who looked like them, they thought, well, those roles are not for people like me. And so it was creating these limiting beliefs. And the second reason it's a problem is even if the woman said, all right, I don't see any female role models, but that's okay, I'm going to go for it anyway. They didn't have women to talk to get guidance on, well, what does it take for a woman to rise? Because men and women do have very different experiences in the workplace, and especially in male-dominated environments. So this is a problem that I wanted to solve. I wanted to give women all over the world access to female role models. I wanted to show them what's out there. There are so many women everywhere doing incredible things, but they just aren't seen. And so I wanted to solve that problem. I wanted to highlight women doing amazing things and give other women access to their insights, their experiences, and their learnings. So that's the first problem I was trying to solve: access to female role models. The second problem I was trying to solve, something that was bugging me for a long time, was the image of the Arab woman, right? The world stereotype. Now, how many of you have been somewhere where someone said something really stupid? Have you ever experienced that? Right, okay. The stereotype of the Arab woman is alive and well and negative, right? And this was really bugging me wherever I travel, and I travel an awful lot for work. Hi, Henry. So this is another problem that I wanted to solve. I wanted to tell our story. I wanted us to own our narrative, right? We are Arab. We are capable, we are determined, and hear our voice. So that was the second problem that I was trying to solve. First, we wanted to address the gap in female role models. Then we wanted to shatter the stereotype of the Arab woman. The third and final thing that I was trying to solve was, again, another thing that had been bugging me for years. I started my career in London 20 years ago. 20 years ago, in management consulting, they were already talking about what women, keeping women in the workplace, and how are we going to retain women, and how are we going to inspire. They wanted to give me a female mentor 20 years ago, and they were telling me about part-time opportunities and all of this. And so, here I was, 15, 20 years later, still having the same conversations. And this was bugging me. I'm like, well, why? We've been all this talk for 20 years and the needle hasn't moved. What's going on? And I couldn't understand it until I read this book. Okay, it was a book written by a professor at Harvard. Her name is Iris Bonet. And it blew my mind. It was that light bulb moment that you see in cartoons, Sting. And the book is called What Works? Gender Equality by Design. And what she talked about explained why, for the past 20 years, all the talk has resulted in no meaningful movement in women at the top. And what I found was that we've diagnosed one of the major problems. It's true, we diagnosed it correctly, unconscious bias. That is a problem. But we had given it the wrong solution. Have you guys ever have you ever been told about unconscious bias? Who knows about unconscious bias? Great. And how have your organizations tried to solve that problem? Anyone? Thank you, Henry. Yes. See, one man, the only person who speaks up. Come on, ladies. That's what we're here for. Come on, ladies. Diversity training, right? Most organizations try to solve unconscious bias with diversity training. Unconscious bias is primal wiring. This runs deep. Okay? We were programmed to have unconscious bias because 10,000 years ago, we needed it. If we're walking in the jungle and we saw something that looked a little different, it might hurt us. And so we're programmed to recognize things that are different to us. That served us 10,000 years ago. It does not serve us today. Okay? And these primal wirings you are not going to get rid of with a half-a-day training course or even a 3-day training course. So what Professor Bonet's work showed was that you can't, this is so ineffective, all these billions of dollars on diversity training are wasted. What we need to do is change processes. It's process redesign. And for me, that was mind-blowing. All these years wasted doing diversity training when what we needed to do was pull out subjectivity from the equation in every process of the employment value chain. Pull subjectivity out as much as we can. You can't eliminate bias, but you can certainly mitigate it. So when I read this book, I had to get the word out. Like, I was so, energized by it. And I was like, how? Everybody needs to know. Everybody needs to know this. And how was I going to get the word out? The other thing also was that I'm a super curious human being, and I wanted to know more. And so I wanted to talk to Iris Bonet. And I wanted to interview her about it. She's a professor at Harvard. I'm this, curious professional in Dubai. I thought I needed some context. So I sent her general Harvard email address. I sent her an email. And I said, hey, I have a podcast. I didn't. And I'd really like to interview you and get to know more about your work. And she said yes. And I was like, oh my God, I have to create a podcast. And that's literally what happened, and she was my first guest. So those are the reasons I created the podcast, was to give women all over the world access to role models so that we can see what's possible. To what was the second thing I mentioned, people? Thank you, you're listening, thank you. And then the third thing was to get the word out. Everybody needs to know Professor Bonet's work. So that's the why. The how. How did I go about it? I'm an engineer by training, and I've worked in strategy and sales my whole life. I have no background in media. I don't know anything still about media. But one thing I do know is that great teams can get you much farther than you can get yourself. And so what I did was I hired people. So I brought on board a content strategist who helped me figure out, who was the audience for this podcast? What would they be interested in? What kind of guests should I bring? How should I structure it? And so he really helped me think through this. And then I brought on board a producer, and she's been great, and a sound engineer. And then for interviews that I do in person, I hire a videographer and get those videos edited and create 1-minute promotional clips that I put on social media. None of this I could do by myself at all. And all of this was self-funded. And so what I would say is for the how, it's fantastic. I love the gig economy. The gig economy has made things possible that were never possible before. Like this podcast would never have happened if I hadn't been able to use Fiverr.com or Urid.com to get the talent that I needed for those hours that I needed, because I can't pay salaries, right? This whole podcast was funded from my 17 years of savings. And so my next step in the how is to figure out how to get When Women Win to pay for itself, because it has to be sustainable. And I just want to give a shout out here to a woman-owned business, Urid.com, Noor Al-Hassan, Jordanian entrepreneur, and she's created this platform that enables people, men and women, to add value, to help us anywhere in the world, from wherever they are, from Gaza, from Amman, from Cairo, wherever they are. So please check out Urid.com and support them if you need translation or transcription. Urid, U-R-E-E-D. Yeah, and it's an amazing service. So that's the how. We're almost at Q&A, but I thought I would talk a little bit, I answer the question. Everybody asks me, what have you learned from When Women Win? And that's a question that is really impossible to answer here and now and do it justice, because I've interviewed 75 of the world's most impressive women, and it's really like a PhD in life. So by the way, please use it. It's free. It's created not for women like you. It's created for you, with you in mind. And really, I feel like for me, it's been my PhD. But if I had to pull out a few key learnings, I would say it's helped me recognize, number one, the power of a platform. So what I do for work is I go into a corporate or a conference and I give a speech, and that's great. And it's wonderful if you can impact the lives of 20 women or 200 women. But when you have a platform, you can impact the lives of millions of women. And so my target is, well, it's pretty random, really. I had 10 million. Yesterday, I decided it should be 20 million. I don't know, whatever it is, it should be high, right? Because that's the power of a platform. And not only that, it's not only the reach, it's also the voice. Because, yeah, it's great that I can be at a conference and speak, or in a corporate and speak. But imagine harnessing those other 75 women, and there's more than that. There's so many. For every one woman I interview, there's 10 that I couldn't, right, just logistically. And so imagine harnessing that collective awesomeness and getting all their wisdom out. So that's really made me appreciate the power of an online platform. Another thing that I kind of knew, but it's really hammered it home for me, is the power of role models. Because women reach out through LinkedIn, through Instagram, through the When Women Win website every single day and say, thank you so much, I feel so empowered and I feel so inspired. So I know that role models matter. And so when you go back to your work and your daily life and your company, always remember that. And if you don't have a program of showcasing female role models to your female staff, do consider putting that in, because it's super effective, and we know this now. And the third sort of big and final point I'm going to share, because I'm sure the list is 100, but I'll try to keep it to these ones before I open to Q&A. The third one I share is the power of an idea. Okay, I grew up here in Sharjah, up the road, and our parents, the way they taught us is you need to know stuff deep. You need to study it. You need to read the book. You need to have the coach. But actually, what I've realized through When Women Win is that very simple ideas can change the course of someone's life. And it's happened to me so often over the past 2 years. And I'll share a few examples of just simple ideas, like 5, 6, 7 words, that I have found super liberating and empowering. So one of them is, you've got to lean into what makes you different. Lean into it. And actually, I interviewed Carla Harris yesterday for When Women Win. That'll come out either this week or next week. And she said something along those lines. So it's come up with a lot of the guests from When Women Win. And I found it so interesting and so liberating. I'm like, wow, I don't have to pretend to be someone else. I don't have to be this, this, and this. I can just be me, and that's my competitive advantage. And I found that really empowering, because nobody can be you as well as you can be you. So that was one. Another concept that I found really, really liberating is that the goal is progress. It is not perfection. Okay? For a lot of us, we grew up thinking that we had to be good at everything, right? All the time. And that's not possible, and that's not necessary. That's just unnecessary pressure, right? And so this concept of, but the goal is progress, don't you know that? Like one of the guests, the goal isn't perfection. There is no perfection. I was like, oh, wow, I can do things I'm bad at. That's okay. I can keep doing yoga. That's okay. I suck at yoga. Actually, I quit yoga, but that's another story for another time. But anyway, other things I'm bad at, maybe I'll start learning more languages or something. But I find it very liberating, right? And then finally, another one that a lot of the women that I interviewed talk about is, it's okay not to be okay. And we have to keep remembering that, because there's a lot of pressure on leaders, male and female, that we always have to be on and leading and powerful and smiling. And you know what? We're not sociopaths. Okay, generally. I mean, we all have bad days, and we all make mistakes. There are no exceptions. And sometimes we're not okay. And that's okay. And I think the message here is, when you see someone in that position, you be there for them, and you demonstrate empathy. And then when you need them, they'll return that favor. And so those are the three, sort of the power of ideas, the power of a platform, and the power of role models. Those are, I guess, three of the takeaways that I've had, but happy to answer your questions before I do a short wrap-up. Oh, thank you. Please.
How many subscribers do you have right now, and how do you go about getting your numbers?
The question was, how many subscribers do I have? I don't know how many subscribers. I only know downloads. And so, well, I think, so we estimate from the number of downloads that there are about 20,000 listeners right now. The top three markets are Saudi Arabia is number one, and then UAE, and then USA. And how do I go about increasing the numbers? Well, that's a great question. That's a code I'm trying to crack. It's a very noisy world, the world of podcasts. So we rely on people like you writing reviews and sharing the podcast on your social media platforms. 4 minutes to go. That's it. Please. Oh, okay. So the question was, what's the last book you gifted someone? And the reason she asked that is because I always ask it on my podcasts. That's very clever. I like that. And the reason I ask it, obviously, is I'm a voracious reader, and that's a really good question. Okay, actually, so I gifted someone just last week, my friend Maggie. It's a book by Patrick Lencioni, and it's called Three Big Questions for Frantic Families. All right, and it's a blueprint for frantic families and how to get things in order. And I found it very, very insightful. And so, yeah, that's the last one I gifted. Thank you. Yeah, everyone needs to get this book, yeah. Please. Okay, great. When did I start recording the podcast, and why did I choose the podcast? All right. I'm going to answer one part, and then I'll wrap up because I answered that in the... So why did I choose a podcast? And to be honest, the barriers to entry are very low, which is a good thing and a bad thing. So it's easy to start a podcast because all I had to do was buy lapel mics and a Zoom recorder and pay $20 a month to lip sync to upload. So the barrier to entry is very, very low. But the negative of that, of course, is that, well, then everybody's doing a podcast. So how do you distinguish yourself in a very noisy field? And that's something that everybody's grappling with. When I started 2 years ago, October 2017. 2 years, yeah. I do, so the way I do it is every season is 30 episodes. So season 1, 30, season 2, 30, and I'm literally halfway through season 3. Yeah. Any more questions? Great. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with my last point, and what I want to leave you with is the power of you. Okay, we talked about the power of platform, we talked about the power of role model, we talked about the power of ideas, but really the power of you. And this is important because I think there's so much deep in us that we tap when we really, really need to. So I launched When Women Win in October 2017. And 6 weeks later, I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I had a lot of choices to make. And one of them was, well, do I continue the podcast or do I just ditch it? And of course, it would have been easier, maybe, to ditch it. But the feedback, sorry, my sister's tearing up. Don't. But no, I decided to go with it because actually the feedback that I got from the early sessions was so very good. So it made me realize that people needed this stuff. You know, there was a hunger for it, and the hunger was global. And so I was doing therapy every 2 weeks, and the first week I was very tired, but the second week I had a lot of energy. So I was going around doing everything I needed to do. Sorry, I see all these people who know me tearing up. Please stop. And recording 2 sessions of When Women Win because I really wanted the show to be a weekly show. And I kept going with that, and all through chemo, and then by the end of season 1, When Women Win was a top-rated show on iTunes UAE and iTunes Saudi. Actually, Maya Aitani sent me the picture of number 1 on iTunes. I didn't know; she knew before I did, which was really cool. So now I look at charts. But yeah, it's been going really well. It's listened to in 180 countries, and feedback comes. You know, we're a partner of UN Women, and CNN has done a feature on us, and so it's been going extremely, extremely well. And what I want to sort of leave you with is there's a lot of lessons that I've learned. Oh my gosh, Kristalina Georgieva's in the house, everyone. This is the head of the IMF. Hello. I can't wait to talk to you. I can't wait. All right, great. Thank you. The podcast that you're about to come on. Please join us. Yeah. So we'll catch Kristalina up. Is that okay? Great. So we talked about why I started When Women Win, how I went about it, and the lessons that I've learned. And took Q&A, and now I'm doing the wrap-up. And what I'm wrapping up is to leave them with the power of you. I talked about the power of an online platform. I talked about the power of role models, and I talked about the power of an idea. But what I really want women to walk away today with is the power of you and what we can do. And part of that is the story of how I created When Women Win in October 2017, and 6 weeks later I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I had to make choices about whether to continue with it or not, and I decided to. Sorry guys about that. So the final thing I'm going to leave with is, what have I learned? It's been a very bumpy road. What have I learned? So I'll leave you with 3 ideas, because I talk in threes, you may have noticed. All right. The first thing is, nobody does anything on their own. There is no such thing as a self-made man or self-made woman. Okay? Nobody achieves anything on their own. Find your tribe. Find your tribe. Friends, family, colleagues. There's no size limit. Find them, and when you need their help, ask them, or they won't know. Number 1. Number 2, I'm almost done. No, I've been interrupted too many times. Number 2 is own your successes and failures. Own your story. Own your narrative. This is really, really important. And what do I mean by that? You are not a failure just because you missed a sale or a deadline, or a relationship ended. This is not failure. You learn, you get up, you move on. And when you do succeed, please don't go somewhere and hide and expect the business gods to know that you succeeded. You need to celebrate your successes. You need to promote your successes. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, that's fine. Again, go back to your tribe. Get them to promote your successes. And you promote theirs. And finally, stay optimistic. Be optimistic. That is so, so, so important. Okay? Optimism is everything. And I think I'm going to close now. Woo, we made it! Thank you.